Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Bradley Turner has always been the kind of man who followed a very clear logic: work hard, maintain order, and take care of what he built with effort. Since he was young, his discipline was almost like a trademark. Over the years, he built a solid career in the technology sector, accumulating promotions, respect, and stability. His lifestyle required sacrifices, and one of them was time. At least once a month, he would go on trips for meetings, international fairs, and negotiations with investors. He always came back loaded with gifts, stories, and that gentle way that made everyone around him believe his life was an example of success. And indeed, for any observer, it really was. The house he shared with Madison was in a nice neighborhood, surrounded by friendly neighbors and with silent rules about how to behave. Madison was loved by everyone. Elegant, polite, articulate, the kind of woman who knew how to talk to anyone about anything. At dinner parties, she knew exactly when to laugh, when to compliment, and when to change the subject to avoid discomfort. To many, she was the soul of the parties and the pride of the neighborhood. The couple was always remembered as an example of harmony. And perhaps because of that, no one ever suspected anything. Not even Bradley, who believed that his routine was the fair price to pay for a peaceful marriage and a comfortable life. Madison, however, had a different way of seeing things. She felt like she was living a well-rehearsed play. A play that demanded perfection in every line, in every gesture. And maybe that's what led her to look for something that reminded her she was alive. During a regular afternoon at the gym, while doing a series of leg exercises, she locked eyes with Carter, the new personal trainer at the place. He had a quick smile, confident body language, and that kind of attention that doesn't go unnoticed. Over time, they started talking about trivial things: posture, diet, muscle pain. Gradually, the conversations became longer. They began laughing together, sharing experiences and inside jokes. When Madison realized it, she had already included Carter in her daily routine. The physical involvement was just a consequence. The first time they were together happened in an isolated parking lot, inside his car. Madison left with her heart racing and a feeling that mixed guilt with excitement. From that moment on, she made a decision: if she was going to keep this up, she would have to control everything. She wouldn't leave any traces, marks, smells, or clues that could put the image of the perfect wife she had built at risk. Carter lived in the same gated community as them, a few streets away, which made everything easier and riskier at the same time. It was a large neighborhood, with wide streets and similar-looking houses, which made discretion easier but also required caution. Madison considered meeting him in hotels or cafes but quickly dismissed those options. Public places increased the chances of being seen, and she knew that a single mistake could destroy everything. That's when she decided that the safest option would be to use her own home, since Bradley traveled at least once a month and stayed away for a whole week. Inside her home, she would have total control. There, she could predict every move. Being naturally organized, she developed a meticulous system. Every time Bradley left for a new trip, she took pictures of the rooms in the house. Chairs, rugs, curtains, cushions. Everything was photographed in detail. After Carter left, Madison reviewed each photo one by one, comparing angles, objects, and even marks on the floor. If anything was out of place, she fixed it before her husband returned. This ritual repeated itself for weeks. Carter always entered through the back door. He never left anything of his in her house. If they ate something, she washed and put it away before any smell or trace remained. Madison went so far as to note the exact times of Carter's journey to her house, to ensure he never crossed paths with a curious neighbor. She believed the secret was safe because her intelligence protected her. And indeed, everything seemed under control. No delays, no accidents, no messages exchanged at the wrong time. Carter was discreet, he followed instructions. He knew Madison was married and, in a way, seemed comfortable with that condition. He never asked her to leave her husband, never questioned the hidden meetings. They saw each other, enjoyed their time together, and went back to their lives as if it were part of an invisible agreement. During one of their encounters, Carter mentioned that he admired how cold and confident she was. He said it was impressive how she managed to hide everything, as if she had trained for it. Madison just laughed, saying that smart people know how to keep secrets. But deep down, she knew the game she was playing was dangerous. Still, she felt in control. Her biggest fear was letting a detail slip, but every return of Bradley only reinforced her confidence. He never asked anything strange. He never showed any suspicion. He remained loving, kind, and attentive, as always. They had dinner together, talked about work, laughed at old jokes. The routine stayed the same. And for Madison, that was confirmation that her plan worked. Until that moment, everything was where it should be. And she believed that if she kept acting with precision, nothing would change. When Bradley returned from his trip, he didn't have the same smile as usual. He was serious, reserved, almost cold. Madison noticed the atmosphere as soon as he walked through the door and asked if everything was okay. He responded that he needed to talk. They went to the living room, sat on the couch, and she expected something mundane, maybe work news, a family issue. But when Bradley opened his laptop and turned the screen toward her, her world stopped. He started showing images. Videos. Audio recordings. Madison fell silent, her eyes wide open, unable to hide the shock. There were no screams, no words. Just the evidence in front of her, and the expression of a man who already knew everything. A month earlier, the scene had been completely different. Bradley had returned from yet another long trip. Upon arriving, he hugged Madison affectionately, smelled her familiar perfume, and thanked her for everything. He went upstairs, took a quick shower, and when he came down to grab a beer from the fridge, something caught his attention. He grabbed the can, opened the fridge again, and stood there for a few seconds. There was one missing. He had the habit of mentally counting how many were left, and he clearly remembered leaving 6. Now there were only 4. He thought for a moment. Madison never liked beer. She always preferred white wine. Did someone stop by? A friend? A quick visit? During dinner, the conversation flowed lightly, but the doubt was hammering in his mind. At one point, without sounding suspicious, he asked how her week had been. Madison answered naturally, saying everything had been calm, that she had taken the opportunity to organize some things around the house and rest. Then, as casually as possible, Bradley asked the question. "And did you have any visitors this week?" Madison's eyes widened slightly, she hesitated for a fraction of a second, but maintained her composure. "No, no one." "Why?" He responded without showing any emotion. "Nothing, just asking. Sometimes your sister comes by, or your parents." Madison, relieved, gave a slight laugh. "No one came by this week." "You should invite them more often," Bradley added with a gentle smile. "Especially when I'm away. So you don't feel so alone." She just nodded, and the conversation continued. But Bradley had already made a decision. He wouldn't say anything about the beer. The next day, without making a fuss, he bought a security camera kit with motion activation and started installing them discreetly whenever Madison was taking a bath. He used that time to position the devices strategically, behind books, in lamps, in the hallway, and a small lens under the shelf in the living room. He knew that if something was happening, he would need proof. 3 weeks later, he left for another trip. But this time, the laptop went along with a different purpose. He wanted to observe, understand, confirm. In the first 2 days, everything seemed normal. Madison walked around the house, cooked, watched TV, cleaned the garden. Nothing out of the ordinary. But on the 3rd day, just before 2 in the afternoon, the alert on his phone went off. He opened the transmission from the camera at the back door and held his breath. Carter entered as if it were his own house. He walked through the kitchen with familiarity, opened the fridge, grabbed a beer, and sat on the couch. A few minutes later, Madison appeared, smiling. The two embraced intimately, and right there in the living room, they began undressing. Bradley froze. He felt his blood boil, anger burning in his chest, but he held back the impulse to call. This needed to be faced face to face. Carter stayed for hours. They talked, laughed, walked around the house as if it were theirs. Bradley couldn't sleep that night. He barely managed to work during the entire week. While everyone thought he was participating in important meetings in another state, he was there, glued to a screen, watching his life crumble in real time, and gathering evidence for what was to come. The scene returns to the moment Madison faces the laptop. The videos playing in front of her left no room for denial. She tried to stay composed, but her eyes quickly filled with tears. She brought her hand to her mouth, as if trying to contain something that was already slipping away. The tears began to fall. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating. She looked at the screen, then at Bradley, unsure where to begin. She tried to explain herself, her voice trembling. I felt lonely. You traveled so much, Anne. I didn't plan this. I swear. Bradley remained still, observing the scene with an expression that mixed hurt and disappointment. The pain he felt was visible, but there was something even stronger, the coldness of someone who had been betrayed by the person they never expected. He took a deep breath and, with a firm voice, spoke while looking directly into her eyes. Do you know why I found out? Because of a beer. One damn beer, Madison. I saw everything through the cameras. I saw you taking pictures of the living room before he arrived, adjusting the cushions, checking every detail, as if preparing a set. And after he left, you put everything back exactly as it was. Every object, every folded towel. You thought of everything. Except the beer. Your lover got thirsty. He opened my fridge and took one of my beers. And that's when I realized. A beer. That's all it took for me to understand that my house wasn't mine anymore. Madison cried silently, trying to approach him, but he stepped back. If I hadn't noticed that, how long would you have kept going? How long? Were you going to greet me with a kiss and then run to him as soon as I boarded the plane? Is that it? She tried to say something, but he interrupted her. Enough. Go. Get up. Pack your things and get out of my house. Now. Madison hesitated. She cried like someone who had just lost their footing. But Bradley didn't wait. He got up, went to the bedroom, opened the closet, and started throwing her clothes into a suitcase. Silently, she followed him. She didn't dare ask to stay. He went downstairs with the suitcase, opened her car, and threw everything onto the back seat. She got in without saying a word. He stood there, staring. No kiss, no hug, no goodbye. Just the image of a shattered woman leaving the house where she had built her lie. Madison went to her older sister's house that night. And Bradley stayed there, standing in the garage, looking at the empty street, feeling the bitter taste of someone who didn't just lose a spouse but also the trust in everything he once believed was real. Bradley didn't let the matter end with the pain of separation. As soon as Madison left the house, he contacted his lawyer and initiated divorce proceedings, based on marital misconduct, a term recognized by North Carolina law that allows the betrayed spouse to seek legal advantages during separation in cases of proven adultery. But Bradley went further. With the evidence in hand, videos, camera footage, and screenshots, he also filed a civil lawsuit against Madison and Carter, based on the alienation of affection law, still valid in some U.S. states, including North Carolina. This law allows the betrayed spouse to sue the lover for interfering in the marriage and destroying the emotional bond between husband and wife. The judge carefully examined the evidence. The videos were clear. The dates matched Bradley's trips. Carter's involvement was constant, and Madison, despite being careful, had left the mistake that revealed everything. Given this, the judge didn't hesitate to grant the divorce with terms largely favorable to Bradley. The house stayed with him. The joint accounts were frozen and later closed. The division of assets was done according to the agreement Madison had always avoided, and which was now imposed without negotiation. And more, the civil case proceeded. Months later, the final decision came. Carter and Madison were found responsible for the destruction of the marriage. The court ordered both to pay significant compensation to Bradley, as reparation for the emotional and moral damages caused. It was a hard blow for the two. Carter lost several clients from the gym where he worked, his name circulated in local forums, and he had to move. Madison, who valued control and appearances so much, now lived with a tarnished reputation and drastically affected finances. In the end, everything collapsed because of a single slip-up. One simple beer. Madison, after leaving the house where she had lived for so many years, was taken in by her older sister. For a while, she stayed secluded, too ashamed to even go out on the street. People talked, and although no one said anything directly, she felt the looks piercing through her like knives. She had to rebuild her life. The money had dwindled, expenses were tight, and she knew she couldn't keep relying on the goodwill of her family. She started looking for a job, resume in hand, jumping from interview to interview until, weeks later, she landed an administrative position at a mid-sized company. The salary was modest, far from the standard she was used to, but it was what she had. She sat every day in front of a simple desk, performed her tasks diligently, and brought lunch in a container. The woman who once controlled every corner of her own home now barely had space for herself in her new work environment. It was a bitter but necessary fresh start. Bradley, on the other hand, moved on with his life. He continued in his executive position, now with more freedom and peace of mind. The monthly trips were still part of his routine, but the weight of leaving home had lessened. He returned with the certainty that no one was taking his place, and that was liberating. The lonely nights in hotels became moments of reflection, and no longer of suspicion. He felt lighter, more attentive, more centered. He didn't let himself become hardened, but he also didn't allow the past to guide his next steps. Over time, he returned to places he had left behind, like the bar he used to frequent with his childhood best friend. It was there that he told him everything. Between one drink and another, he revealed the details, the doubts, the exact moment he realized everything, and the twist caused by a beer. His friend listened in silence, sometimes widening his eyes, sometimes shaking his head. When Bradley finished, his friend put the glass down on the table, looked at him, and said, "Man, I learned something from your whole story. Never mess with another man's beer." They both laughed. They laughed genuinely. And for the first time in a long time, Bradley felt like he could breathe a sigh of relief. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.